On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the data is in and there are Red Sea disruptions. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So we are looking at data put out by Kpler, the parent company of marine traffic, and what we're seeing is further disruptions across the Red Sea. Now, we already knew about the container ship disruptions, but now we're seeing the information and the numbers on disruptions across other sectors. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come in. So this is the report put out by Kpler, and we're going to go through it and really analyze some of the key data that they came up with. So right off the bat, you're looking at the change in Suez Canal transits from January 24th to November 23rd. And as we know, container ships are way down, but when you start breaking down the sectors, it's even more pronounced. Tankers down 23%, dry bulk 27%, LNG, liquefied natural gas, 73%, and LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, 65%. That's a total drop of 30%. And when you start looking at the individual sectors, you can see exactly where it's playing out. So this chart shows you Middle East, Gulf, over to Northwest Europe. And these are Suez Max rates. Now, Suez Max is the largest crude oil tanker you can bring through the Suez Canal. And if you look at those rates going around through the Suez, you can see they're about $1 to $2 cheaper than going around the Cape. So if you have to go around the Cape, you're adding about $1 to $2 per barrel going around. And when you start looking at million barrel tankers, you can see where that cost difference comes in, $1 to $2 million. It gets to be significant. Now, yes, you're saving a Suez Canal toll, but a much longer distance. And the other key thing to always keep remembering here is it's not just a longer distance, but you're losing out in the number of transits you can make in a year. And when you're doing the ledger for a ship, that's really important. When you look at crude oil flows via the Suez Canal by millions of barrels per day, when you look at the Suez flows, you're seeing it, has gone up. You were at about 2 million barrels per day back in 2017. It bottomed out in 2021, which we all expect because of the decrease in oil, but then it pops back up to over 3.5 million barrels a day going through. And a lot of that has to do with Russia exporting oil through that region, heading to the Mideast, to India, to China for refinery. And you can see the percentage share follows along almost exactly in line, jumping up from 2021 of about 4% up to about 8%. You look at Russia, and this chart breaks out Russian oil in yellow versus all the rest. You can see the significance of Russian oil quite a lot, talking about over 1 million barrels a day going through that is purely just Russian oil. It peaks and troughs, but a pretty good significant amount. And that distance gets to be fairly significant, so that when you're going around the Suez, when you're going from the Mideast to Europe, that's probably one of the most significant areas where you see an extension. You go from 25 days up to 42 days when you're going from Russia to India, and India extremely impacted by this, going from 22 days to 45, over 100% increase there. Let's look at refined fuels. And when you look at refined fuels, a couple of things really start to stand out here in this chart. One of the things you start seeing is what types of refined fuels. So a lot of different refined fuels. Gasoline, naphtha. Naphtha was the cargo that we saw on board the Marlin Lawanda that caught fire. Other distilled participants, jet. But if you look at the right chart, that's the one that's really the most significant for me, because if you look at jet fuel, how much Suez Canal share of total refined products, going through the Suez Canal, over 30% of jet fuel goes through the Suez Canal. And if you start having diversions, if you start seeing those diversions take place, that means jet fuel isn't getting to Europe. That's going to impact air travel quite a bit, because if you're not having enough jet fuel in Europe to handle air traffic, we're going to see cargo start to slow down. When you start looking at the tanker transfers and the tanker transit, so this shows you MR tankers, what are known as medium range tankers, kind of a short range tanker that focuses on moving refined products. LR tankers, and the different categories of LR tankers going up in size. And then you get to the very large crude carriers. You can see how the jump is taking place. And what you're seeing is the number of tanker transits through the Suez. So if you look at those totals back in September, you're right around 20 to 23 ships a day going through, whereas when you get to the end here, end of January, looking at less than 15 going through. And you're seeing substantial drops here in major vessels going through. Still seeing those LRs going through, that's that refined petroleum going through. But when you start seeing this reduction, you're going to need to add more ships to it. According to Kpler, when you see this reduction, when you start seeing an increase of about 70% in terms of ton miles, then you're going to require at least another 35 tankers to fill it up. And again, the big issue we see in the tanker market is there's no extra tankers. All tankers are out, they're doing service, there's no laid up tankers, there's no new tankers really coming online fast enough. This is going to be a big problem to get refined product around. Take that same element and let's look at it via the number of transits, clean tankers going through and the amount that they're carrying by product type. And again, you can see that impact. Gasoline, jet fuel, look at that reduction in jet fuel, almost down to nothing coming through. Gasoline, naphtha, definitely a significant change happening. And again, you see those elongated transfers taking place, just taking longer to get those products. Remember, we have a lot of Russian crude that's coming out of the Black Sea and the Baltic, meeting up with ships off of Spain, off of Greece, heading to the Middle East, India, and China to be refined and then shipped back to Europe because that's new fuel, that's new product. It's not encumbered by the price cap once being Russian. Once you refine it, it's a different fuel. And that's going to really slow everything down going through. When you start looking at the dry sector, the bulk commodities, notice that we're seeing a start to drop in this. Now, bulk ships tend to be the low value ships because of the nature of their cargo and their size, tend to be on the lower end. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars versus hundreds of millions of dollars. But what we're seeing here is bulk commodity going down. So you see the tankers down below, that large swath, the green sector there, that's the dry bulk. And then above it, that kind of yellow and darker green is those liquefied natural and liquefied petroleum gas tankers. And notice how they almost completely disappear. We're seeing the reduction in tankers, and we're even starting to see the reduction in some of the bulkers going through. Again, when you look at the daily transits term of size, and they break these ships into different sizes, from a handy size being basically the smallest up to what's called the Cape size, you start looking at them and you start seeing that reduction take place. Again, we're looking at back in September at a little over 20 ships a day going through the Suez Canal. This is the 7-day average. Peaks in November, right around 27, 28, but now in January, we're down to 15. And that means those ships are taking that long route around Africa. Now, for some routes, this isn't a significant amount. For example, if you're going from the U.S. Gulf Coast to Asia, and now all of a sudden you've got to take those extra days, not too terribly much longer, 53 days down to 57 days. And it could be a bit more affordable, actually, because you're not doing that Suez Canal transit. However, if you're making that run, for example, from Australia to Europe, that's going to add some days. You see 4 extra days added in there, but where we really see it is the Europe to Asia. That's that significant route that we're seeing right now. And let's not forget, while you can do that the South Indian Ocean, South Atlantic run right now, because it's summertime down there, when winter rolls around, that's a lot rougher time period. Let's look at the LNG market. So LNG, the amount that flows through the Suez versus the share that goes through there. And what you see is a growth in the LNG market. A low point down in 2020. And you look at the transits going through, again, different types of vessels, the XLs, the Ls, and the Q-Flex. The big thing to look here, number one, is it basically falls off a cliff. There's almost no LNG transfers taking place as of now. Too expensive. Nobody wants to take a chance of a missile popping a hole in the side of it. Now understand, missile popping a hole in the side of a product tanker, Marlin Luanda, can start a fire, can be significant, but we haven't really seen explosions of the warheads. Didn't see that in that vessel, didn't see it in the Zagraphia, the bulk carrier, but punching a hole in a liquefied natural gas or liquefied petroleum gas carrier, that is significant. And so what we're seeing is the LNG and LPG tankers are diverting around. and those shares are falling off. Now, LPG, there's still a few coming through there because you're getting LPG diverted and routed through some key areas. You'll see here that route out of Qatar heading to Europe. We still saw some of those ships heading that way because of the short distance. But overall, what we're seeing right now is a massive reduction. And if this continues, if we continue to see this huge reduction in the number of ships, it's really going to raise the question about whether or not the Houthi are having a significant impact on the global economy. A lot of people are sitting there saying, well, the container sector is going to work its way out. It will settle down, and we'll just get used to that. The bulk sector, dry goods, oil tankers, crude and clean product, LNG, LPG, not so easy. Because if you lose that vital shortcut through the Suez Canal, it's going to create big disruptions, especially as you're heading into the coldest part of winter right now, up in Europe, in the Americas, and in East Asia. That's going to be significant. February and March, always kind of the worst months. Big, huge energy consumptions going on in that period. Not sure what's going to happen. Many ways the Houthi are driving the measures right now. And what we're seeing is the inability really to knock the Houthi out. Now, rumors are abounding about a big strike coming in either against the Houthi, maybe against the Iranians, who knows. Movement of forces are underway. What we do know is that we're definitely going to start seeing this impact. It's already hitting Europe. It's hitting Asia. We're going to see it in the Americas. Only a matter of time that it ripples through the supply chain. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a thumbs up, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You hit the super thanks button down below, or head on over to Patreon, and you become a monthly, yearly subscriber. Until our next video, Sal, signing off.